Hello everyone. My name is Alan Ivory, and I have a guest to go and share with you today. And we're going to learn what her job is very shortly. So first, let's go ahead and introduce yourself, if you will.
So hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Canarazi.
All right.
Can't say what
So
I am.
awesome. So we're going to go through the four why or the four W's of what you do, who you are, what made you interested, those sorts of things. So the first question I want to ask you is, what tools do you use as a scientist?
So as a scientist, I sometimes use a microscope. I also use shovels, and I use trowels, and sometimes I use tape measures.
Interesting. I've used many of the same things, but I think we do very different things. All right. So when did you become interested in science?
I became interested in science when I was really young, so in about the fourth grade, and I was really interested in bugs.
Ooh, okay. That's what their lesson is on this week is on bugs. So awesome little tie-in. Where do you do the majority of your work? Either a location like Guatemala or also lab versus out in the field?
I do the majority of my work in a lab.
I assume here in Gainesville.
Yes.
All right. Awesome.
Mhm.
Okay, so why is your work important?
Why is my work important? Um, with my work, you can learn a lot about the history of humans.
Oh, okay. That should give our students a decent guess at what you do. So going back to the bug thing, what was so interesting to you about bugs?
I just thought they were really cool. So when I was in about the fourth grade, I was actually homeschooled, and in our science book, we were learning about these things called galls that are these little blisters on the backs of leaves. And I wondered, I was like, oh, what are in these things? So when we were learning about them, I saw that they were outside on some of the trees at our house. So I went outside and picked some leaves and broke those open to see what little bugs crawled out. And from there, I just started looking for other bugs everywhere, all over the yard. Got a field guide and started learning what all the bugs were there that I would find. And so that's how I started.
Awesome. That's so relatable to what we're talking about because majority of these students are third through fifth grade, so right about the same age you were. And their lesson on Tuesday was to use a field guide to identify insects. So very similar. Today, their goal was to go outside and actually collect some insects and use the field guide to identify them. So that's amazing that you mentioned that.
I still have that very same field guide and I still use it.
Oh, that's adorable. All right, so how about you go and introduce what you do? So what is your job? And give us a little tour of what you want to show us.
Okay, so I am what's called a collection manager at the Florida Museum of Natural History, and I am an archaeologist. And specifically, I am what's called a zooarchaeologist. So can I share my screen now and show?
Of course,
Okay,
let me give you permissions really quick.
okay,
All right, you should have permissions now.
okay, okay. Are you able to see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. So I am. Is it going to click through here? Okay. So, like I said, I'm a zooarchaeologist. And so, my actual title is I'm a collection manager for environmental archaeology at the Florida Museum. And so, what environmental archaeology is it has three subfields in it. And what we do is we study people and their relationship with the environment in the past. So, that's looking at things like their relationships with animals, which is zooarchaeology. And so, that's what I do with plants, that's called archaeobotany, and then with the soils and landscapes, and that's called geoarchaeology. So that's just a little quick intro. So in our lab, we have collections from all of those different types of remains that come from all different types of archaeological sites. not only in Florida, but also in the Caribbean, in the rest of the southeastern US, northern South America, and Mesoamerica. So, and I can take you through. So I said initially that I work mostly in the lab, and I do, but I also get to work in the field. And that's a really fun part also. So I do get to dig and excavate different types of sites. And so that's sort of what that looks like. And you can see we as archaeologists digging square holes. And so that's always a fun part. So as an archaeologist, one of the things I do is when those excavation happens, what will happen is people will send us the animal bones or the plant remains, or we'll take soil samples from those sites. And so as a archaeologist, I look at the animal bones. And so what I do with them is they come in these fragments. So you can see in these pictures, they're all broken up because they're usually super old, right? And so I take those fragments and I compare them to modern collections. So we have a collection in our lab of modern animals. So we need that in order to be able to visually look at the fragment that we have and compare it. So you can see in that picture, I'm comparing cow mandibles. So that's a jaw. So that's just part of the cow. And I have just a little section of that. And so I can use that modern one to show me, oh, this is what this is in this archaeological site. And so the next thing I want to take you through is an actual tour of our lab. So we have this virtual tour. Let's see if this pops up. And so I'm gonna have to move my computer to go through. So let's get you over here. So this is what our lab looks like. And so we have in one room, I was talking about those modern comparative collections. So I have to move my screen over. So those modern collections of the animals that we use to compare to those that we find in the archaeological sites are in this room. So we'll have things like, sometimes we get shark teeth in sites. So we have examples of modern sharks with all their different species names, and we can go and look through all these boxes and find sometimes we can identify something, a little fragment of something to an exact species. Not always, but sometimes. And so that's one part of our collection. And we go down the hall into the lab. So this is one of our workspaces. And as you can see all over, we have all those black boxes with all those modern comparative specimens in them. And so we all use these for our work. And we also have the archaeobotany area. So we also have examples of modern plants and seeds, because sometimes we'll find seeds in archaeological sites, even pollen and phytoliths and things that we can use to determine what the environment was like in the past. These are more workspaces. So you see we have specimens, some what we call articulated or all together instead of just the fragments. Like you saw in the other room where we just have like just a jaw, and some of them we have completely articulated specimens. So we know where each of the bones come from, what side it comes from, and how the animal looks when it's whole, but without any skin or flesh. These are some of our soil collections here. And then we also have more comparative collections. All of our mammals, they're split up because we have a big collection and not enough space in all the rooms to put all the collections. And our archaeological collections are actually held in these spaces here in these cabinets. So if we go forward more, in each of these cabinets, you'll have archaeological collections, and they'll look very similar to what I showed you previously in the box of bones and all those fragmented bones. So that's what is in all of these different, all of these cabinets. So each of these rows has this many cabinets in it. So we have a pretty big collection from a lot of archaeological sites.
Do you mind telling them why there's that little spinny thing on the end of the aisle?
Oh, the little spinny thing.
Yes.
Yes. So the spinny thing is to move the compactor. So we call these compactors, so they're all a bunch of shells. So we just take that and just spin it around, and then they slide on these little tracks that you see here. So that is a way to sort of save space so that we can get through down each aisle and get what we need to get. So sometimes you'll see that in places like libraries will have things like this so they can fit all of the books in there. And that is actually one of the ways I think of myself as sort of like a librarian, as a collection manager. So I know a lot of what is in these compactors and a lot about the comparative collections as well. So when people have questions, they come to me and ask, oh, where is this? Or how would I pose this sort of research question? Or where can I find this certain animal? So my job is sort of like a librarian for archaeological collections. So I think that's all I have for my slides. And we can go to
Awesome.
questions.
So I actually had a question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know where to dig?
How do you know where to dig? That's a good question. I'm going to try to stop sharing my screen. Okay.
I mean, because if you go back to that picture where you could have that square, it was just loaded with stuff. I just go to my backyard and see stuff loaded up like that?
Mm-hmm. Well, so everywhere, right, is an archaeological site because people have been living in places for a very long time. One of the ways that we choose where to dig depends on what type of research we're doing. So that site that I showed you is actually in St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And we were digging a historical site. So that's why you had those bricks. Those were actually Danish bricks from a site. There's actually a fort in St. Croix, a Danish-controlled fort in St. Croix. So one of the ways that people figure out how to dig is doing analyses or using machines that will actually look under the ground for you. So they'll show you an outline of a structure, or they'll show you that something is under there in areas that you're interested in. We may also have historical records, depending on where you're digging, and maps that tell you where structures or where things might have been. So you can use that to determine, okay, well, this was here next to this tree. So we can put in a test to see if we find what we think we'll find here.
Wow. So you've been to St. Croix. What are some places that you've been to?
I have been to Panama, although not for doing archaeology, actually for working on paleontology. And I've also been to the Bahamas, working on archaeology. And my main research is actually here in the US in Georgia on one of the barrier islands called St. Catherine's.
Amazing. All right, well, now I'll open up to the students if they want to ask any questions, either unmute yourself or to go and put it in chat. So she became interested in science whenever she was in 4th grade. She was very interested in bugs, just so you can fill that question on your guide. Any other questions?
Okay, Mr. Ivory, we have some questions here. Go ahead, Jasmine. You can come on up. I don't want to wobble the camera too much. Right there.
Do you ever find big old dinos?
That's a great question. Do we ever find dinosaurs? Well, since I'm an archaeologist, I am interested in what people were doing in the past, right? So people who study dinosaurs are paleontologists, and many times they study animals and places before humans were there. So I haven't found any dinosaurs.
Have you ever found ancient cities, like, for example, Jericho? And Jericho is located in Israel.
I don't do that type of archaeology. I've never been to Israel, so I have not studied any of that.
Oh,
Nice question.
Sorry.
Anna, come on up. It's right here.
how much stuff have you found? Like in all, how much stuff have you found? Like in between
Wow.
plants and all the stuff.
Wow, how much stuff have I found? Well, it's really hard to count how much stuff I've found. I've done analysis, which means like I've done a lot of identifications and studied bones from different sites. And since they're all fragmented, I could identify within one site or one part of a site, I could identify thousands of bones. So over the years of doing this, I've identified well over 100,000 bones.
Okay.
But other things that I found, I've found, you know, there's ceramics in sites, so there's all different types of things in sites, right? So you don't just get bones. You'll get the plants, you'll get other artifacts, ceramics, what we call lithics or stone tools or stone. So there's all types of things to find. It's just what you do and what you decide to study with them afterwards.
You're so pretty. Thank you.
Any other
You're
questions?
welcome.
Come on up, Emma.
Hi.
Have you found any like remains of like humans?
No, and it's very good that I haven't. There are certain rules in place if that does happen, because there are times when it has, but there are certain laws and regulations involved when that does, but I have not.
So what are some of the interesting things that you have found while you've been in the field?
Oh man, that's the hardest question. Everything's
Right.
interesting to me. Well, the site that I showed you in that photo is actually that Danish fort site is actually an interesting site because it is a plantation era site. And so in that one, we're looking at the lives of enslaved Africans at the fort. So that actual picture shows sort of different remains within that site. So there was like a glass bottle in there were bones in there were all sorts of things. So because of that, and because of all those bricks that you saw, it looked like a structure that had come down or had either fallen down or had actually been demolished. So looking at the whole story of a site really is the most interesting thing, rather than each of the individual parts or things that you find. Really what we're looking at is the story and the people associated with all of those artifacts and bones and things.
The more I learn about archaeology, the more I'm interested in it. Like, again, as the students know, I work with animals and plants, and I'm looking at things that are alive. There's just so much mystery to things that happened hundreds or thousands of years ago. So it's really nice to be a storyteller of the past.
Yes, you're welcome to join us.
We have one more question, if you don't mind. Go ahead, Jasmine.
Have you ever been to Las Vegas or Hollywood?
Unfortunately, I have not.
All right, is there any more questions? All right, well, if you'd like, go ahead and use the activity that's in your handout. But as for me and Nicole, I think we're gonna go and head out, okay? Bye, thank you,
Thanks,
Miss Nicole.
everyone. Sure thing.
Bye.